Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the panel Canada-Brazil Cooperation and Collaboration in Science, Technology and Innovation, organized by the Canadian Science Policy Centre. My name is Angeli Vasquez, and I'm volunteer at the Events and Workshops Committee in CSPC. Before I begin introducing the moderator, I want to do the land acknowledgement from where I am today. Montreal is on land that has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Anishinaabe and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory in which peoples of the world now gather. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator, Dr. Fernanda Negri. She's an economist and director at the Institute of Applied Economic Research in Brazil. She holds a PhD in economics from the University of Campinas and completed postdoctoral research at the MIT. Also, she has been a visiting researcher at Harvard in 2017. In the public sector, she has played a role in policymaking, notably as economic advisor to the Minister of Development, Industry and Foreign Trade, and the head of the Monitoring and Evaluation Office at the Ministry of Science and Technology in Brazil. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished panelists, esteemed colleagues and guests, thank you for joining us today as we discuss the scientific cooperation between Brazil and Canada. It's a pleasure to moderate this debate. More than ever, science is becoming an international endeavor. The cooperation among countries and the diversity of research teams are crucial to increase the impact and quality of scientific research around the world. For low and middle income countries such as Brazil, cooperation is even more important to overcome certain challenges related to the lack of scientific infrastructure and expertise in certain areas of knowledge. Historically, both Brazil and Canada made substantial contributions to the global scientific landscape. Brazil, with its unparalleled biodiversity and a strong tradition in areas such as agriculture, aviation, health sciences, and Canada with groundbreaking advances in areas such as artificial intelligence, space research, and environmental sciences. Our bilateral scientific initiatives have aimed, or should have, at addressing shared challenges from climate change to sustainable development and from public health to technological innovation. We know that when two nations like Brazil and Canada come together in the spirit of scientific cooperation, the impacts extend far beyond their borders. Some results of this kind of cooperation can be mentioned. For instance, enhanced capacity building through academic exchanges and training programs, transfer of technology and best practices, amplifying the benefits of innovation, joint publications and patents, increasing the global impact and recognition of our researchers, and direct contributions to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That is a very important objective of the international cooperation in science, emphasizing our commitment to a better global future. As we gaze into the horizon, the potential for deepening this cooperation is immense, in my opinion. The digital age, the urgency of sustainable solutions for the globe, and the challenges posed by global health, especially related to the population aging, are threats and opportunities for this cooperation. Let me just remind you that Brazil and Canada have probably the biggest public health systems in the world. And that could be a very important area of cooperation in order to improve science and technology, in order to improve the access for health in both countries. All these threats and opportunities beckon us to work even closer. Brazil's rich natural resources and research talents, combined with Canada's expertise in cutting-edge technologies, can lead to solutions that the world urgently needs. Before introducing the panelists, allow me to let you know that we will be taking questions through the Q&A feature at the end of panel. And we are also having two polls, one of them before the debate and the other one at the end of the panel. So please, we would like that the audience could also answer these polls. Our panelists today will be, our first speaker is my friend, the Ambassador Ademar Seabra da Cruz Jr., Ambassador of Brazil to Mozambique. He served as Minister Consular at the Brazilian Embassy in Warsaw in 2021 and 2022, and as Deputy Consul General in Toronto between 2016 and 2021. He was a former advisor to the Minister of State for Science and Technology and Innovation in 2015 and 2016. He headed the Division of Science Technology at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs from 2009 to 2015. And he previously served as the Brazilian embassies in Montevideo, Lima, and London. He is a member of the board of directors of the Advanced Institute for Artificial Intelligence in São Paulo, and he holds a PhD in sociology and a master's degree in political science and philosophy, logic, and scientific method from the London School of Economics. Welcome, Ademar. It's a pleasure to share the floor with you. I don't know if I should present the other speakers after Ademar or not, but I think it would be better. So, Ademar, the floor is yours, and I will introduce the other speakers when you finish your talk. You have 15 minutes. Please, Ademar, the floor is yours. You are muted, Ademar, sorry.
Thank you very much, Fernanda. Great to see you, great to see old friends. Je suis ravi de vous revoir et je remercie chaleureusement le Centre sur les politiques scientifiques do Canadá e a Aline Dantas. A Aline é uma antiga amiga também. Nós tivemos a honra de trabalhar juntos no Centro de Relações Internacionais, Ciência, Tecnologia e Inovação da Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina. Então, estamos aí recuperando contatos de algum tempo atrás. I'm so thankful to the Canadian Science and Policy Center and also to the organizers of this greatly prestigious event. Thank you so much, and very necessary, because innovation is still, I think, for long, Brazil is thirsty for innovation. We need to develop our own system. We have to enhance our productivity, to diversify our economy, and to have a greater presence in the international economic scene that is coherent or that parallels our own domestic economic strengths. I will divide my generals, I would say, 900 seconds like this, basically in 4 quick parts. The first thing is to, in fact, just giving a kind of overall title, if there's an overall title for my speech, would be the concept of innovation diplomacy. I would like to delve a bit deeper into this concept and understand and try to explore a bit as well. Of course, everything is a kind of, which will be a kind of vol d'oiseau, kind of something very superficial, of course, but the role of innovation diplomacy as a critical step in a national development strategy of countries, and in Brazil in particular, and to probe deeper as well, to explore possibilities and opportunities of the role of Brazil-Canada relations in science, technology, and innovation for Brazil's innovation diplomacy and therefore for our innovation strategy. So my 4 parts will be, I will just briefly, I know that there will be a better and deeper explanation about the possibilities and capabilities of Canada, of course, but I'll just bring about some some few bullet points and concepts about the importance of Canada for Brazil, specifically for Brazil, and the role it can play for our scientific and innovation, and more important, innovation development. I will explore a bit this concept of innovation diplomacy and see how it can be creatively, how it can be a kind of strong tool for innovation as a whole, domestically speaking, for Brazil. Then I will speak about more specifically about certain Brazilian challenges and needs in terms of innovation, so that Canada, I could say, also, again, a bit superficially, but how Canada can fulfill certain roles, can cover certain gaps in those challenges, and how we can create together a great partnerships that is mutually benefit, but of course, with a strong impact in Brazilian productive system. And at the end, some, again, bullet points, just bullet indications of suggestions, a kind of wrap up of a past and maybe certain new suggestions that can be deployed, that can be taken into consideration for Brazil-Canada partnerships in innovation diplomacy. So Canada, first point, Canada, of course, is a critical partner for this innovation diplomacy strategy for some very basic and somewhat obvious trends. Is responsible for almost 4%, 3.8% of the world's science output, and with a kind of population of just half a point percent of the world's population, it has, on the other hand, scientific output that outnumbers in 8 times its scientific production. So it also has an important levels of investment. The global investment, our expenditure in research and development, a kind of important figures around this. This varies in the decade between 1.7 and 2%. I'm going to talk a bit about this figure as well and see how it can also, in the case of Brazil, it has a kind of different outlook and different composition. It's, of course, Canada, as Fernanda Ginegri rightly stressed in her presentation, is one of the world's biggest investors in areas such as, for instance, artificial intelligence. Canada, in fact, is the first country in the world to adopt a national artificial intelligence strategy, the Pan-Canada IAA strategy. And why is so important? Because we're talking about cross-cutting and transverse technologies that apply to all fields of knowledge, to all fields of industry, to all society, as we are already experiencing. So countries who are in the forefront of this challenge, of course, can be of immense benefit to Brazil, as we expected. So, and of course, is intensely engaged in spurring business competitiveness through innovation. Canada now bears countless support programs and initiatives in the federal, provincial, municipal levels, and many of them, they are open to foreign participation. So this, of course, a very important harness connection to innovation diplomacy, and has a kind of clear strategic mindset for catching up with competitiveness and productivity global trends. Canada also has a great, clear policy for attracting human capital. I think we know a kind of YouTube or internet video, which is quite popular. The American science popularizer, Michio Kaku, he talks about America's H-1B visas as being a kind of the framework and the landmark for United States leadership in innovation in the world. And Canada, of course, follows the same path, following kind of likewise policy and even more sophisticated in certain aspects. I think most importantly, Brazil and Canada, we have a kind of fruitful and intense, both bottom-up and top-down collaboration between our countries. So we have strong governmental policies. We have a kind of, we had a framework agreement in science, technology, and innovation of 2010, was extremely innovative in itself. I could say kind of administrative innovation, diplomatic innovation, and has some features and tenets which are very executive and agile, something that's different from many of the others. And from the bottom-up approach, we have, of course, 10,000. I think it's an estimate. This estimate varies. Maybe it's a kind of outdated number, but around 10,000 Brazilian students, researchers, PhDs, which are scattered throughout Canada. And this, of course, becomes a very important human capital force, both for Canada's development, of course. So it's a kind of our brains which are in Canada, but on the other hand, they are an immense asset for Brazil as well, if we make those connections quite fairly and in a kind of also bold terms in terms of cooperation with Canada. About the innovation diplomacy, to understand what we want to talk about this and how those realities, Canadian and afterwards the Brazilian realities, they connect. The basic purpose, the telos of innovation diplomacy, is to expand our productive bases, diversify Brazilian exports. We know that they are very concentrated. Brazil is a quite competitive nation, is a rich nation in many aspects and circumstances, with our many social and economic problems as well. But the basic thing is that the road, the path to development requires this expansion of productive bases, expansion of our exports and availability of resources, more productivity, employability, competitiveness. So the innovation diplomacy can be defined as a kind of search for international partnerships to leverage this productive development and diversification. These innovation needs, is an important tool that all countries, OECD countries, G7 countries, in one way or the other, they have already adopted that. There are plenty of literature that talks about how, without using properly the concept. So the concept is something relatively new. I could say that the concept of innovation diplomacy is something from this century, maybe from 15 years, 13 years, who knows, but it's something new. But the phenomenon is a kind of ancient phenomenon. So we see the books from Mariana Mazzucato, The Role of State, and Ha Zhongxun, the development strategy of Korea, what China did, the United States. So innovation diplomacy is something which is absolutely critical and present in all these things. So, and also, besides leveraging development and productivity, it helps seek technological management and foreign investment solutions for business domestically. The domestic sector is something very important for diplomacy. It may seem a bit contradictory or paradoxical, but it's something that is specifically rooted in domestic programs and products. Otherwise, it won't make much sense. And another, I could say, another target or another goal or objective of innovation diplomacy is to replicate the solutions, good practices, which had already been tested by private competitors, international partners that can help leverage business models at the domestic level. So one thing that innovation diplomacy and science diplomacy as well, when I say about science diplomacy, is a diplomacy which is made by scientists, by science. It's not a concept that has to be necessarily connected to government. So of course, science diplomacy, the governments and diplomacies and ministries of foreign affairs, they have a critical role in this. But of course, whichever agent which is part of a system of innovation, in the case, of course, industries, we're talking about the triple helix model, we're talking about all this kind of evolutionary, neo-Schumpeterian models of innovation. So all of them, they presuppose and innovation does not exist. We cannot talk about innovation in any aspect if we don't connect strong governmental policies, and a framework and a model and an environment that is friendly to the expansion and creation of business, to business development, and of course a strong network for knowledge production, science, basic science and applied science. So the connection and interaction of this is something which is very well known. But of course, how this connects, this basic concept of triple helix, in short, connects with innovation diplomacy, because innovation diplomacy has to be demand-driven. So this is something which is critical for the concept and for the strategy of, for instance, as a kind of collaboration programs and schemes with Brazil. In this case, domestically, the Brazilian productive sector has to present certain challenges, has to present certain demands, which is demands for its technological development, for its technical development, for its competitiveness, for the enhancement of its workforce in terms of human capital, which is connected to this development model. It has to be a clear technological foresight, or a firm or a business in the micro level, or economic strategy in the macro level. They have clearly to see where they want to be in the future vis-a-vis their competitors and vis-a-vis the markets in which they want to operate. So in this case, it has to be demand-driven, cannot be supply-driven by universities. So universities, we have extraordinary, very good universities, extraordinary, very good scientific programs in Brazil, not in all of them, of course, but in some few of them we have some kind of global leadership. But the point is that in which sense they connect to the needs of the Brazilian domestic sector. When the Brazilian domestic sector, or in innovation platform or innovation scheme, we identify those needs, so those needs can be translated diplomatically, can be translated in terms of forging, of building up international partnerships, international connections by governments, by the firms themselves. For instance, the Federation of Industries in Brazil, they have a very nice concept, which is entrepreneurial diplomacy. It's very close to innovation diplomacy. It's a kind of a clear-cut angle to see the problem, but it's basically the same attitude and the same mindset. And of course, universities. But universities, they are quite strong in this, because in Brazil or elsewhere in the world, since centuries or decades, these connections for scientific development has been made. But the point is that Brazilian universities is not in majority yet connected to the productive sector, connected to the impact of its research, and most conspicuously in STEM for the productive sector. Please, I don't know, tell me when, I think I just have 5 minutes, but warn me, because I just can modulate here what I can say, because I have a lot to say in this as well. And but in short, just to make a short kind of sum up of the second point, is that the things that innovation diplomacy, the basic concept which is attached to innovation diplomacy, I could put basically 7 aspects or 7 principles or values which are connected to it, and which, of course, as we are talking about innovation diplomacy, we're talking about 2 things. We're talking about diplomacy operation in the international level, transboundary level, of course, in whichever configuration and geometry you can think. And of course, we're talking about innovation, about the basic theoretical and practical and economic requirements that are attached to the concept of innovation. So the first thing is, domestically, of course, we have to avoid this, what the theory calls the spurious competitiveness factors. So excess subsidies, or picking up winners, or giving benefits to certain sectors in detriment to the others, doing this in a more voluntaristic way and not part of a kind of development strategy. So this is a kind of double concept which are connected. So it has to be, as one Canadian author once put it very, very well and clear, spending gobs of money in innovation without a clear objective is money wasted. Put like this quite well. Has to be a kind of state policy. Of course, cannot be a governmental, the policy of a certain government, the policy of a certain level. Has to be a kind of, the state, the overall state has to be geared towards repositioning the country in the international division of labor and repositioning its industrial features in a more competitive line. So this requires a kind of societal mobilization and not only governmental, and therefore it's state policy. Has to be bottom up, of course, bottom up, because without the mobilization of the private sector, right incentives, connections, planning in the micro level, associations, and a kind of, I use this word, thirst for going to other markets. In this regard, for instance, the Mercosur agreements in the 90s, they played a pivotal role for the expansion of Brazilian firms abroad. Now we are expecting also the free FTA, free trade agreement between Brazil and Canada, which will, of course, unfold many opportunities and will be a tremendous spur for innovation diplomacy. And of course, has to be from the demand side, not from the supply side of universities, but the demand side from the productive and the social sector of countries, in this case Brazil. And of course, we presuppose a free market operating with all the rules which it entails for these principles to thrive. In the case of Brazil, we have, of course, when also we talk about innovation, I think it can fall in a kind of a common, not in common sense, but can be some kind of can be a kind of empty concept, because of course it requires a strong base in terms of upstream innovation, which is the strong formation in education. So Brazil has a tremendous inequalities on this. We know about what are our indicators in PISA charts, for instance. But of course, as we are a very unequal country, we are a country of excellence in many areas. Huge chunks of the Brazilian population, they excel in education, in science, in production, in scientific output, in innovative solutions. But of course, as having a kind of unequal society, in an equal society with such kind of inequalities or inequities in education, of course, it takes a toll in whichever other policy. So it's something that has to be very seriously heeded from the outset, from those things to thrive. And this leads other things. For instance, in Brazil, we have 90% of our PhDs, they are still in the public sector. I am exactly a symptom and a small example of that. And when OECD countries and even countries like Canada, it's exactly the opposite. So the big chunk of the PhDs, they are in industry, they are in the private sector, they are in decentralized stakeholders or decision takers in economic terms. We have in Brazil a great number of islands of excellence, but not properly a strong system of innovation yet. Just to put something in perspective, and I mentioned the kind of figures, Canada has, let's say, nowadays, I'm not sure about the figures, but 1.7 around in global expenditure in R&D, so have private expenditure, government. Italy is a country that has 1.3, and Brazil, let's say 1.0, 1.1. We're not that bad. Of course, the theory says that to have a kind of dynamic self-propelling system of innovation, you need 2%. But let's say that 1.1% is a very good figure. And it is indeed. Of course it is. Brazil, compared to a great number of countries of what they call the global south, is a kind of leader in innovation basically for these R&D activities. But the problem in our country, I mentioned Italy, because innovation system is completely widespread throughout the countries. We're talking about very small, not micro, but small firms, medium firms. In the north of Italy, there are thousands, tens of thousands of small business that they contribute with some kind of innovation in product and process. Whereas in Brazil, our innovation extremely hypertrophied, is concentrated in firms like Petrobras. We have the greatest R&D center in Brazil, which is connected and responsible for 1/3 of the private innovation in Brazil. Embraer, Braskem, Vale. So we could say that our BERD are all concentrated in a few bunch of firms. And this, of course, and in this case, so no innovation system can be achieved by picking up winners or only by creating islands of excellence. It has to be oriented to international competitiveness. It has to be a kind of neural network in society. I mentioned two Canadian initiatives or documents, the Supercluster Initiative, for instance, and they have a very interesting document in Canada that has been published, I think, 2018 or 19, the Competing in a Global Innovation Economy, the current state of R&D in Canada, recognizes specifically and critically the necessity for Canada being abroad, for being internationalized. The firms still has problems. Of course, the complete interconnection of supply chains between Canada and the United States is a great opportunity, at the same time a challenge. But in any way, they always recognize the need for internationalization of its economy and of its innovation. And when we talk about internationalization of economy and of innovation, of course, this is nothing less than innovation diplomacy. So yes, I'm not going much like this. So of course, it was mentioned the Brazilian agricultural sector, which is extraordinarily competitive. It's a great sector, of course, for which we are very proud of, and it only brings us very good news year after year. But there are some caveats on that. Of course, it's not a kind of comprehensive system. Brazil has some problems. Our production output, again, in agriculture is greatly concentrated in a very few products, a very few markets, I could say like this. And the Brazilian growth and productivity, for instance, agriculture in the past about, let's say, 15 years. Agriculture has had productivity gains in more than 100%. Industry, 0, and services, 11. So this kind of distortions, of course, they do not contribute to a kind of organized strategy for domestic innovation. So, and when we rely so much in commodities and agribusiness, we're talking about Dutch disease, we're talking about risks, concentration, everything related to exchange terms. And we've been lucky because the prices of food for several externalities in the world market, they have impacted favorably the stability of certain prices. But I think that IPEA, maybe Fernanda Ginegri could help this, but I read a great study by IPEA a long time ago. That's something quite interesting. Brazil has multiplied by 6 the productivity and production of certain products, like, for instance, wheat, corn, soya. So now this year we're going to harvest around 330 million tons of grains. 30 years ago, we harvested 53 million tons of grains. But the point is that this, of course, did not entail a multiplication by 6 of Brazil's income with the exports of all these riches. So, because of course it has an impact in prices, loss of competitiveness. They are inelastic prices in many. They are very elastic prices in many situations. There are demand shocks. So all of this, and supply shocks. So all of this creates instability in relying on a kind of single sector for the development.
Sorry
Yes?
to interrupt you, Ambassador. If you can wrap up in a few minutes.
I will. That's very good knowing it's precisely. I just was getting up to the point. And these are, I could say, this reliance. And there's when you talk about these imbalances in our production output, of course, this comes up to the beginning of the presentation, which is the sheer necessity of diversification and to make the country competitive and successful as it is in our agribusiness. It's one of the reasons, for instance, that we created great institutions in our country, like, for instance, the STI Institute of Technology and Innovation, the Embrapi, and others, which are geared towards precisely this diversification and of a success story. With Canada, which is something that we can, of course, discuss, and the things have been told before many times. I need just 1 minute to mention them. And I think that with the FTA between Mercosur and Canada, I have to know exactly what are the points and how this can be incorporated in this, but of course, certainly to pose tremendous good opportunities for, in this case, the partnerships and associations between firms of both countries. But we have to take advantage of our diaspora in Canada, as you said, our science, technology, innovation, this 10,000 Brazilians. There's a very good study from the World Bank from 2005 that said that 70% of foreign direct investment or foreign portfolio investment in China was due to the 1.5 million Chinese who went abroad in that diaspora. They call it in Mandarin the Huawei's, the green turtles that went abroad and they came back to China and they established all this kind of good environment for investments in FDI, which happened with China. So we need, of course, to spur our CEO forum between Brazil and Canada. Brazil has very important investments in Canada, vice versa. The things has been growing. We have steady paces in that, but this can entail a kind of systematic strategy between the private sector. I think that we also could think of a Brazil-Canada Innovation Center. We have a very good one with Sweden in São Paulo that works and brings some kind of very nice results. We have another one with Germany, and I think that another one with Norway, more specifically in oil and gas in Rio. But this is Canada. Of course, we have a strong linkages and presence of private sector in our bilateral relation that could entail this. And innovation calls, certain things that have to be oriented. But I would just finish by emphasizing, highlighting the great sectors that we had an immense possibilities of. In the case of Canada, Canada will benefit from a partnership of Brazil through the concept of reverse innovation, which are not go into that. But our priority areas, we have great possibilities and opportunities in the pharmaceutical industry, pharma industry. Rare earth elements is something that has been already probed before and something excellent. Agriculture, not to mention, Brazil has the highest, best institutions of agricultural research in the world and practice. Likewise, Canada, I'm talking about Guelph University and this OMAFRA and all these institutions, research institutions in agriculture that you have in Canada. Green mining, biomedical sciences, of course, agri-foods and agri-food with everything that has to do with biotechnology and biomaterials and so on and so forth. So there's a great constellation and kaleidoscope of sectors, of high-tech sectors, of knowledge and innovation-intensive sectors that are just waiting for having the right incentives to develop the great innovation diplomacy program between our countries. The future is bright, but of course there's a lot of work to do, and we must be persistent, and we must be think on the far future in which we don't know exactly if we will be operating this or that, but it's our role and duty to do this. So thank you so much. I'm sorry for expanding this. I have enthusiasm for this, and sometimes I go ahead, but I'm ready then to cooperate in other circumstances and areas in which can be required. Thank you very much, Fernanda. Thank you very much again, Aline and CSPC. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for your insightful words about international innovation diplomacy and fields of opportunities and challenges for scientific cooperation between Canada and Brazil. I would like to introduce you our second speaker, Professor Alejandro Aiden. He is president of Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council of Canada. As a highly accomplished researcher in the field of mathematics and faculty member at the University of British Columbia, Professor Aiden has significant leadership experience in the Canadian research and innovation ecosystem. Professor Aiden is currently the chair of the Canada Research Coordinating Committee and vice chair of the governing board of the Global Research Council. He was CEO and scientific director of MITAX and director of the Pacific Institute for the Mathematical Sciences. From 1989 to 2004, he was a faculty member at the University of Wisconsin-Madison in the US, and Professor Aiden earned a Bachelor of Science at the National University of Mexico and a PhD at Princeton University. Professor Aiden, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be here. As was mentioned in the intro, I grew up in Mexico. I was a student there, undergraduate, and we always admired the achievements of Brazil, kind of the big brother. And in particular, in the areas of mathematics, Brazil is well known, having a Fields medalist, and I've visited their mathematical institutions. IMPA is very famous worldwide, so I really want to commend and celebrate the excellence of Brazilian science and innovation, in particular fields of strength, which are well known worldwide. Now, I'm going to focus on kind of describing the landscape of the instruments which are available for Canada-Brazil cooperation. And afterwards, so we can have a discussion about where we can go from here. So as the ambassador mentioned, there's a Canada-Brazil Agreement for Cooperation on STI, which was ratified in 2010. And that, I think, is the key mechanism for the bilateral cooperation between Canada and Brazil. Now, some numbers. Canada is Brazil's 7th most important science and research co-publications partner, while Brazil is 18th for Canada. Over 15% of Canada's international scientific publications were co-authored with Brazilian researchers. So it's a non-trivial collaborative status already. And for the past 15 years, Canada has been the top destination for Brazilians studying abroad. So this issue of global mobility, talent mobility is very important. And the bidirectionality of that mobility is, I think, a key challenge that needs to be addressed. Now, during the period of 2017 to 2023, 37 Brazilian venture capitalists have invested with Canadian VC investors, and 20 Canadian companies received investments from Brazilian VC investors. And under Brazil's Growth Acceleration Program, PAC, announced in August 2023, I believe, it's an infrastructure development program. Canada has interest and expertise to contribute in various sectors: transportation, energy security and transition, health, water, clean tech, and digital inclusion. So we're really talking here beyond just the scientific research collaboration, going on to technology, innovation, and the broader partnership between the countries. And I want to mention that to underscore the importance of the Canada-Brazil relationship, our foreign minister traveled to Brazil in June 2023 and held a variety of meetings there. And there were discussions focused on green tech and the environment, which are, of course, high priorities for both governments, I would say. Now, there exists a joint science and technology coordinating committee, and this committee will be meeting in 2024, the sixth meeting of that committee. And we're looking forward to the topics that will be agreed upon mutually. The recent one was held in 2021, and it focused primarily on artificial intelligence. But that's where we might go next to discuss collaborations. Now, in terms of the science collaboration, there's a program in Canada called the New Frontiers in Research Fund, which brings in international partners to work on focused themes. In particular, there's a call or an initiative on research in climate change, adaptation, and mitigation. And we were very happy to see that FAPESP, the funding agency from Sao Paulo, is a core member of the multilateral funding agencies, the multilateral group of funding agencies that are participating in this call for proposals. Other countries involved are Germany, the DFG, UKRI, NSF, etc. In fact, FAPESP is the only funding agency from the Global South. And I want to mention more generally that FAPESP has really had a very strong reputation in the group of global research councils. I happen to be a chair of the governing board of the Global Research Council, which is a confederation of research councils around the world where we talk about best practices and share information between the developed nation, the Global South, and FAPESP has really stepped up, shown a great amount of leadership in the administration of the program and in also in organizing one of our annual global meetings. Now, I was formerly head of MyTax. I don't know if that was mentioned. So MyTax is a not-for-profit organization that is focused on innovation, certainly creating links between academia and industry, and also global mobility with key countries. And I'm happy to say, and I was involved in a lot of that, Brazil has been a historic partner for MyTax, and we've been able to bring quite a good number of talented Brazilian researchers. They have come to Canada. And certainly, I think Canadian universities are very excited about the Brazilian students, Brazilian postdocs, because they're so well trained in Brazil, and they are contributors in a major way to our labs and our scientific enterprise. In particular, there was a partnership between MyTax and CAPES, which I remember signing or visiting to sign that, which was part of the Science Without Borders program. And Canada was allocated 12,000 students under that program. More recently, in August 2020, MyTax and the Paraná State Research Foundation of Brazil signed a 3-year partnership to support post-secondary students and postdoctoral fellows for academic and industrial research internships. And this goes back to what the ambassador was saying. It's very important when we talk about research and innovation, it's a whole continuum from the blue skies research to commercialization. And in particular, the areas where Canada now is quite strong, like quantum, AI, they began as discovery research. And I'm proud to say that as NSERC president, they were funded to begin with by NSERC as discovery ideas, blue skies work that people didn't know exactly where it was going. And then it has moved along the way through certain major investments and interventions by other agencies, and now the commercialization. And there's huge excitement about commercializing AI and quantum technology, which where Canada has leadership, and certainly partnering with countries like Brazil would be important. Now, in terms of numbers, from 2020 to present, the MyTax has supported 197 undergraduate and 75 postgraduate and postdoctoral Brazilian students to come to Canada in the fields primarily engineering, biotechnology, health and life sciences, and also social sciences. So in particular, there's a program where students can come from Brazil to do internships as undergraduates, do internships for a 3-month period and work in a lab in Canada. Then they go back to Brazil. So it creates a mobility in a stage of the career, which is not as advanced as other schemes, but which afterwards pays off in terms of what they do with their graduate program and how the Canadian, shall we say, Canada is a soft power country. The image of Canada, how we help educate and train people around the world is a very important part of what Canada has to offer to the world. Now, on the industrial side, NRC, together with Global Affairs Canada, they have programs for companies. The NRC IRAP has signed 2 MOUs with FAPES and Embrapi for the delivery of the Canadian International Innovation Program, also known as CIIP. And these projects comprise Canadian SMEs working with Brazilian companies. Again, company-to-company relationships where we want innovation to be kind of spread, complementary, and just create this positive movement in both directions. And from 2016 to 2022, CIIP provided support to 8 partnership development activities called PDAs, and these are tech matchmaking missions, essentially. And that allowed 94 Canadian companies to meet with over 500 Brazilian companies to explore co-innovation partnerships. And these PDAs have led to 17 partnerships and worth over $1 million Canadian dollars. So there's some interesting work going on between companies, and more needs to be done, of course, but I think extremely promising, and I think that's a very, very good development for the 2 countries. Now, I want to mention that there's another PDA that will happen this fall from October 15th to the 20th, in fact, in the advanced manufacturing sector. And there'll be a second one in ag tech in the winter of 2024. So things are moving forward on these very critical areas. I should also mention that 12 Canadian SME-led R&D projects with Brazilian partners were funded in the last 5 years, funded by over $3.5 million in CIIP funding. So there's money on the table for these collaborations. Message to the community, which is very important. We can talk a lot, but if we're not funding these collaborations in an intentional way, in ways which really lead to innovation, it's well, we really want it to be pragmatic and have results and deliver. And the most recent sectors of focus include advanced manufacturing, agri-food, clean tech, digital industries, energy and natural resources, and health and biosciences. Exactly, I think the same as the list that the ambassador mentioned. And now I want to mention that in October 2020, NRC and Embrapi signed a memorandum of understanding, and it proposes collaboration in research, technological development, and innovation in mining, including exchanges of researchers and scientists, development of technologies for strategic materials and rare earth elements, and urban mining of waste of electrical and electronic equipment. So we see that we have a lot of instances of great collaboration between the 2 countries. We have a lot of collaborative research, if we look at the publications, and I'm sure that goes across all the disciplines in Canada. And we have mobility of researchers. Frankly, I think it's too one-sided. One of the big challenges we had at MITEX was sending Canadians abroad. It's a big challenge for the Canadian ecosystem. And Brazil is a great place to go and do a research project and to work. So that's a challenge we want to talk about. And then how as we bridge the divide between the academic research and the innovation and the involvement of industry, what we can learn from Brazil. Brazil has some great global players, great companies. Canada has many, many universities, a lot of SMEs, very successful SMEs. What kind of partnership can we do there? And in areas like agriculture, critical minerals, etc., I think there's a natural place to collaborate. And of course, areas developing emerging technologies, disruptive technologies like quantum. Canada has a quantum strategy with significant funding for international collaboration. And I have met some very talented Brazilian physicists and technologists. So again, that's another area where it will be very, very important to enhance the collaboration. I think I'll stop here, and I look forward to the questions and the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Aiden, for your speech and for mentioning several opportunities for Brazilians and Canadians, researchers and scientists to collaborate. And it's very interesting to know about all the initiatives that are going on between the two countries. It's my pleasure now to introduce our third speaker, Professor Evandro Barros. He is founder and CEO of Data Age Artificial Intelligence and Data Age Ventures, founder and president of the I2A2 Institute of Applied Artificial Intelligence. He is a serial entrepreneur and co-founder of AI companies like Signcare Autonomous, Nolec Defense, Simeon, Mr. Turing, Face Factory, Data Life, and he was in the top 50 AI CEOs in 2021 and 2023, and operation manager at Canadian Space Society. Professor Evandro, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm from Data Age. Data Age is a private AI laboratory for corporates. So we help corporates to develop their AI core. So we help them to use their data to increase revenue or to transform into new products. So since the beginning, made a lot of sense, came to Canada. So our company started in Brazil. And in 2018, we came to Canada because we are an AI company, so it makes sense to be in Canada to make AI researches. So when I was listening here about all the collaboration, and made a lot of sense for me and for my company and our story in Canada, and I would like to share a case. So we have a lot of cases about collaborations in Canada because we work very close to researchers and AI centers in Canada, like Mila and Vector Institute. And when we came here for the first time in 2018, we had on that time a project called Syncer. Syncer was a very ambitious project in Brazil because it was really hard to start a company focused on autonomous robots. So we started Syncer as an idea, was just an idea to produce like an autonomous robots to delivery. So on that time, we were like trying to build the technology, because if you are building an AI robot, a robot based in AI, you must to work with hardware, work with a lot of new technology. So it's a really hard project. So it's really hard to start something like that, especially when you don't have an access to some technologies. Like that's a big problem in the whole Latin America. And we decided to bring our engineers to Canada in 2019 to start this project. So what you guys are seeing right now is the first prototype, the very first ugly version of our robot. And we started here I live in Oshawa, close to Toronto. So this place is the Spark Center, is innovation hub in Canada. So we start some prototypes here, testing the technology, and we start some collaborations, not only with Innovations Hub, that we have some amazing Innovations Hub in Canada, but we start some collaboration with universities as well. So at the beginning, we start with community tech on Waterloo, the GMZ, Mars, Venture Lab, Spark Centers. So all of them are innovations hubs that help us to build some part of the project. Some of them help us with designs, another help us with business, another one help us to connect people, and all of them is part of that. So after a while, in 2019, so remember that in 2020, so we had the pandemic situation, and we started a collaboration with Queen's University and University of Goiás in Federal University of Goiás in Brazil, and MicroArt, that is a industry in Markham. So we start to work together to make that possible. So to transform the prototype, just the concept, into something that can be in a massive production that can attend different countries. So right now you have operations not only in Canada, but in Ireland, in Brazil as well. And the technology just was possible because we were working not only in one country, but work with 2 countries working together to build something. So that's why sometimes if you just Google Sinker, you see some places saying that is a Brazilian company, some place saying that is a Canadian company. Actually, we are a Brazilian-Canadian company, and we had a lot of collaboration to build this technology and to take the same solution to a next level. So nowadays, we have something like that. It's a completely different from the ugly version, the first one. And we were running to make that possible on the Collision 2019. So our first version was on the Collision event in Toronto in 2019. So thanks to that event, we closed our first seed round. So a big company in Brazil called iFood, they bought part of the company. So thanks to iFood and all the collaborations in Canada and in Brazil, we build a new solution. So we build something that can be produced by a company like MicroArt. So it's not only the scientific collaboration, but is the industry collaboration as well, because this kind of solution is really hard to produce in Brazil right now. But we are making jobs in Brazil. We are making jobs in Canada at the same time, because both countries, they are working together. So we can have a massive production in Canada, we can export to Brazil, and you have a company in Brazil that is investing in the same technology. So everybody is winning because everybody is working together. So right now you have a completely different solution just because of the cooperation. And thanks to that, and thanks to being in Canada and work in North America, thanks to Brazilian talents as well, thanks to the universities that have been working on both sides. Right now you have a Sinker listed as one of the company that can build autonomous technology. So if you see here, you can see some big companies like you can see Google on Waymo here, and you can see some companies like Starship, something like that. And but you can see Sinker as well. So it's recognized as one of the companies that it's bringing this new technology to the world. So we are very proud of that because was like a so hard work, you know, to make that possible. So, and that was just possible because we work together. And after that, we have this year, we achieve a huge milestone. And actually, this milestone starts in Toronto because we were thinking how to access buildings in Toronto through the path. So how to have like autonomous robots driving through the pathway and reaching the buildings so they can go to different floors. So we were thinking about that, and we start to produce some hardware that can make that possible. So now we have a hardware that can can make vertical delivery, not horizontal delivery, but vertical delivery. So this way we can reach different floors on buildings. And it's a very new technology. So few companies can do things like that because that is very complex. You need to deal with navigation in a vertical position. So you need to remember which floor, and each floor is different. So the robot needs to remember all the mission and need to keep connections on the elevators as well. So need to communicate with elevators. So we develop not only the AI that can navigate it here, but the hardware that can make that possible, because you need a new type of hardware to communicate it with elevators in order to access the floors. So now you have this technology. This technology is being tested in São Paulo right now. And so he is taking, like, we have a 300 missions taking elevators right now. And we're gonna see things like that in Toronto soon as well. So this is just one case. We have collaborations with some amazing universities like Concordia, when you have been working the last 2 years with AI and the neuroscience. So we have working with Concordia on that. And we have more projects with Queen's University as well, and partnerships in Brazil with the Center of Excellence in University of Goiás. And we are working together on the both sides. So next year, we're gonna have some researchers from University of Goiás coming to Canada thanks to this project. And we're gonna have some meetings and collaborations here to discuss the next step of this technology as well. So this is only possible, again, just because some years ago we decided to come here and start to build this bridge and access the fundings to make that possible, and access the specialists, researchers, know-how to build something like that. And now both countries are winning with that. So you are making jobs, we are exporting, and we are developing new technologies and new IPs as well. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, Evandro, for your very interesting work. And it's very, very interesting to know about the technology you have developed. And I have, in fact, some questions here. I have one question for you, Evandro, mainly, but and we have now on the screen the first pool. the organizers asked to participants to answer. And talking back about the question, Evandro, you mentioned the difficulty of creating a company in Brazil, a company of autonomous robots in Brazil. I would like you to explore more detail which are these difficulties, because you know, we are now discussing in Brazilian Congress the regulation of artificial intelligence. And I have the sense, I may be wrong, but I would like to hear from you. I have the sense we are trying to regulate technology that we are not even able to develop now in this time. So we know that regulation imposes some constraints to innovation, and we to regulate international artificial intelligence without being able to develop these technologies because of constraints in Brazilian economy. So I would like you to talk a bit about that and about the difficulties of running a company of autonomous robots in Brazil. I have other questions here. One, I think it's for all the panelists regarding the difficulties and the challenges for cooperation between Canada and Brazil. So I would like, it's a question from Aline that I'm not seeing right now because my chat just closed because the pool, let me see. No. And I have another question from the audience for all of you as well. That I think it's an important question. It's from Julia Salles. She mentioned that we have a lot of constraints about Brazilian students abroad because they are obliged to come back to Brazil after a scholarship. I think it's a constraint that exists in several countries, but in Brazil, we know that we generate few opportunities, job opportunities for scientists and researchers. Ambassador Ademar mentioned that there are few companies hiring scientists and researchers. So what can we do about it? If we oblige the researcher come back to Brazil, but we don't generate any job opportunity for them in Brazil, it will not be better to let these researchers and scientists to contribute to Brazil from abroad while we are not able to generate these opportunities. So that are the questions that we have on screen right now. I would like to give the floor to our panelists again.
Okay, I can start with the barriers to develop this kind of robot in Brazil. We made our first prototype in Brazil with in partnership with another company. It's an agro company, Jacto Group. It's a big company in Brazil, and the problem was more around the bureaucracy to import and to access some technologies. Like we need some sensors, some very specific sensors, and some very specific hardwares as well. So some of the hardwares you cannot access easily in Brazil, so you need to import this kind of hardware to Brazil. So that used to take a long time to do that. Like used to take like 3 months, 4 months to delivery in Brazil, hardware like that. So that's why we came to Canada, because in Canada we received that in less than 3 days. So because we are very close to USA, so we have very fast delivery system here, so you can buy from India or Singapore or something like that. And in Brazil, it's going to be very hard to do things like that. Another point is some companies, they have a restriction to deliver some sensors outside North America. So that become very hard to test. So when you are building a technology like this, you need to deal with the USA security agents, you know, because you are using sensors that they are very sensitive sensors. And the sensors used to be used on military things. So you need to explain for CSA, I don't know, I don't remember right now the organization, but they will receive like a form to USA security agents that you need to explain what you are doing. So it would be impossible to receive the same sensor in Brazil. So right now you are not using the sensor, but to start, you need to start with something strong. And after you need to decrease the impact and the value and the costs. So to start strong and with a very stronger hardware, you need to be in a place that you have no restriction. So this way we could start in Canada faster than in Brazil.
Thank you, Evandro. Professor Adam and Ambassador Ademar, you would like to talk a little bit how the relationship between Canada and Brazil could be improved, and about the question outlined by Julia Salles about the obligation of Brazilian researchers to come back to Brazil. Please,
Sure.
who would like to take the stage first?
Well, I can say a few words about the student if you want, because I'm familiar with that policy. So
Yes, please.
yeah, I think there are a number of countries that have that policy. Others used to have it and then removed it. I'm familiar with the situation in, for example, Mexico. Used to be much more restrictive. I think in the end, what we see, and you think about countries like China that had sent many, many students abroad without any type of restriction, and the majority of them actually funded by the universities locally in the US, Canada, and other places. And many of them gravitated back to China as senior researchers. So they built the careers and then they went back. So they were a diaspora that contributed. And, I'm familiar with the concept because I myself, I have many students in Mexico. I go to visit and contribute in different ways. So I think the student there is mentioning something which is, I think, important, a more enlightened view of the mobility of students. Now, of course, there is the issue of the unidirection of some of these streams. And that's where joint advising, co-tutelle, those schemes might be interesting, where the student has a foot on both sides and can come and go between the two different worlds. Also, I would say not just in academia, but also into business, into research and innovation, working on the robot project, for example. So how we can do that. So that's my comment on that. And the more general collaboration, I think the time has come to make it a more fulsome, more standard collaboration. A lot of what happens in Canada is focused on the usual suspects, the highly developed countries that we work with so much. But I personally think we have to reinforce our collaboration with the Global South. And Brazil, in the Americas, it is a very important target. So we have to double down, and maybe at the next meeting of that committee, we can lay out some kind of a blueprint, how we can put together all these different instruments to see how we can make some progress with that.
Thank you. Ambassador Ademar, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Fernanda. Just beginning from the more generic but utterly important question of Aline. The point is that Of course, we have many strategies and targets that have to follow, but I think that our joint committee meeting of science, technology, innovation, next one, 24, as was said, I think is a kind of forum, adequate forum to bring this question onto the table and to devise strategies that are based upon persistence. So we know that to develop those programs, they take many years, and it's important that the follow-up. It's critical that the follow-up of certain decisions in whichever field, in whichever process involving whichever stakeholders, they may have persistence. They cannot be laid on the way. So this is something which is critical, in which we could define which areas, which processes, which technologies, which gaps have to be filled with the participation of each other. Of course, we have to remember, as Professor Allen rightly said, Brazil is 207 million people, but we're talking, of course, we are very unequal country in many aspects. But of course, we have a whole, if not more, bigger, a whole Canada inside of Brazil in terms of purchasing power, in terms of tech development, in terms of market. So of course, this is something that that's why it's critical for the Joint Committee meeting to have the presence. This is something that I insist quite adamantly. Besides being a governmental discussion, we have to have a strong presence of applied research in critical areas for development in certain sectors, and the presence of business and the business representatives and firms, of course, individual firms and business associations involved in the construction of these strategies. So I think this is something, and of course, with persistence and having a kind of roadmap, and we have to think about which stakeholders, which focal points, where is the budget coming from, with which deadlines and timeline, with which expected results. So it has to be a kind of a coordinated and coherent plan for development of certain sectors in which it could benefit Canadian business and Canadian innovation in Brazil, Brazilian innovation in Canada, and co-development of certain processes in which Brazil, of course, is a very important test case, because being a big market like this, and of course we have reforms and facilitations that we need to go ahead. But of course, I think it entails many opportunities for Canadian innovation, as the stock of foreign direct investment from Canada and Brazil proves to a bigger extent. Of course, we have to double down, triple down that amount, because we have potential and we have room and complementarities for that. The very interesting question about the Brazilian STI diaspora. I mean students, I mean researchers. 2 points I'd like to emphasize. First is this is exactly what China did, and did very systematically. From 1995 until 2010, China had 1.5 million around this researchers, students spread all over the world, with a high concentration in the United States. Now in Canada, we know the extremely important presence of Chinese researchers from every background, every origin, and whatever. And what happens is, of course, this is such a big number. There's no pretense from the government that they could come back one day or not. But many do come back, because the Chinese government had some kind of very concrete steps and concrete incentives for them to come back. They have even some programs. One is called 100 Talents. They would give even kind of subsidies, strong subsidies for them to return, tax incentives, house preferences, and sort of things. The Minister of Science and Technology of China, the one, I think he was from more than 10 years, Minister of Science and Technology, Wang Gang, he used to be the CEO of Audi in China, in Germany, and he speaks fluent Germany, and he was for more than 10 years, and he said, total independence and to devise an innovation strategy and the national science and technology strategy that lasted for 12 years. So it was a kind of systematic approach. And this is a systematic approach from the government. But from the Chinese diaspora in itself, what did they have? This million, or certain, of course, I think the return rate was about 25%. And many of them, they were employed in high-tech business, in high-tech giants, in all types of business and sectors. And when they come back to China at that time, at that critical moment, in this 15-year gap, of course, they helped a lot bring the business and investment back to their country. So they helped to create demand, job demand and technological demand for the action which was not properly coordinated. In the case of Brazil, we also have a big diaspora abroad, of course, and this is financed mostly by the research funding agencies. But the point is that there's no connection with the private sector. We say in one point it's interesting because it's a triangle in points are lacking. The first thing, we have a kind of a dynamic private sector with several different activities and levels of technological development. In certain of parts of this association, I refer, for instance, oil and gas. Oil and gas sector, electronics, we have the National Association Brazil of Electronics Industry, the ABINI, textiles, the aeronautic industry. They have created in certain points some kind of technological foresight studies in which they would like to present themselves to the market in a higher profile, so that they could enhance the pharmaceutical industry in Brazil. An extraordinary success story in this, because they knew the gaps that they had to fill inside to go into certain types of molecules, certain types of processes, enhancing the quality of their products. And they are now present in 40 different countries. It was a tremendous, the growth rate of the pharmaceutical industry. And there was a connection with researchers, Brazilians who were in places like Canada, like Britain, like the United States, that they were formally hired by the pharmaceutical industry due to these connections. We now have a very important Brazilian pharma in Mississauga. And of course, this kind of knowledge of the Canadian market and opportunities, it had some kind of research background and even academic background, which entailed this decision. So the point is that the government, the Brazilian government, has to have a kind of systematic approach to this. Poking and tapping into the needs of Brazilian industry, which they are quite shy in presenting these needs and creating these needs and being ambitious. So we lack ambition, and we have to stimulate this kind of ambition, because with ambition, we stimulate demand, and a demand for technological development and for repositioning of their business. And on the other side, we have to find to tap into the resources, because when you talk about the Brazilian researchers and students abroad, it's not their codified knowledge, what we say. It's not the things that they learn and they've developed in academia, the new theories, the new systems, the new formulas, the new engineering systems. This is, of course, is the core of thing. But most important is the tacit knowledge, which is critical for innovation, which is the strength of the network that they built in the country. So Brazil cannot afford to lose the very strong network that has been built by Brazilian researchers and students in Canada, together, which Brazil is pervasive to the Brazilian researchers in Canada into the Canadian innovation system. So how we connect those parts, what kind of deliberate policy we have to have a proximity between and a meeting between supply and demand, between Brazil and Canada, between the contribution that the Brazilians have to do. So this requires a kind of a coordinated policy for that, which involving, of course, business associations, the government, alumni associations. We have to understand, we have to know, but not knowing what Brazilians are doing abroad, because this is not very difficult to know. We have some kind of data about this, but of course we don't know how to absorb this kind of excellence that's been built inside Brazil, because we do not tap into our demand, we do not create our demand, and we do not make the correct linkages. It's quite a challenge, but it's possible to be done.
Okay, let me just ask the final questions. I think we are near to the end of the session. There are two questions that are closely related. One from Vitor Bruno, that is interested in joining this program, this collaborative programs between Brazil and Canada, and he would like to know how to start, how to join these programs. And another question related to that, if there is there a centralized tool or channel to look for potential collaborations in Brazil for ongoing projects? I don't know if there is this centralized channel of information, but it would be very good. I think these two questions are mainly for Alejandro, Professor Aiden, and Ambassador Ademar. Another question related to supply chain efficiency. Maybe Professor Aiden could say a little bit, because Transport Canada has opened an office for supply chain efficiency and how this initiative can be used to foster collaboration. And finally, a specific question to Evandro again. What are the biggest challenges you face, Evandro, in building this collaboration both between industry and academia and between Brazil and Canada? Professor Aiden, if you want to start to take a little bit the order.
Sure. I think the best thing to advise, if he's talking about the CIIP program to consult the NRC IRAP or Global Affairs Canada, where this program is run, and probably consult on the website. There are other programs that involve the student piece and the research piece. That would be a good place to start. In terms of knowing what researchers are available in Brazil, it's always a problem. It is a problem. When I was at MyTax, we'd always have, and the websites are not in English, and et cetera, et cetera. So it is a major challenge to do that, because we would have knowledge of the researchers in Canada, and you want to do matchmaking, kind of a loose matchmaking between the two communities and between companies also, kind of business development in the country to country. So that would indeed be extremely important. And the supply chain question seems very interesting. I wasn't aware of that. I would suggest, again, looking at Transport Canada and perhaps following up on that, but I wasn't aware of that. And thanks for bringing it to my attention.
Thank you. Ademar, Ambassador.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Fernanda. In fact, I have a very objective and brief answer to the question about which centralized program we could have, not program, with locus we could have in Brazil for all innovation programs, products, research tools, and financing mechanisms and instruments, our state agencies, all the programs from FINEP, all the programs from BNDES, all the ones from the several research agencies and even private. At least the pretense we have. It's a kind of law. It was a law which was enacted in December 2017. I have even the number of the law here. Law 9243, enacted in December 2017, which they call the Sala de Inovação, innovation room, in which whoever comes from abroad, if I am an investor from Vietnam and I just arrived in Brazil, so I'd like to benefit from a kind of recent technology or process which is successful in my country, what can I do to develop this in the market? I only have an immense plethora of incentives, kind of margins of preference, procurement, lots of things, a kind of ocean of possibilities. And this Sala de Inovação had the pretense to concentrate everything like this. The concept was very nice. It was supposed to be fed by all these programs and agencies, and they would make a kind of coordination, and this coordination would be converted into meaningful information to this kind of foreign investors or foreign interest people in developing or co-developing innovation processes in Brazil. I sincerely don't know what was the fate, how is it going. If it's a law only, if it's something that operated, I don't have the slightest idea. But from my personal experience, I think it was quite meager, the result. And I don't see flocks of investors taking a look at this. I might be wrong, but something that I would like very curiously to take a look. But it's in conceptual terms, it's something very good. And I don't know what was made out of it.
Thank you. Evandro, please, if you would like to answer the question about the child.
Yeah, so the answer depends on the type of collaboration you are looking for or the type of granting. But most of the time, it's not so complicated. I would suggest start from the Brazilian side if you are connecting the both sides, like a Canadian university and Brazilian university. If you are working with the both sides, I would suggest to start from the Brazilian side, because on the Brazilian side you can access Embrapa and some grants that you help a lot. Like it's gonna they can make that really fast. For on the other ways, you can like take a long time with some bureaucracy to solve that. But when you are apply for something like Embrp is really fast. And from the Canadian side, it's very easy. Basically, what you have to do is to connect the department or connect the university. They already have people specialized on collaboration and grants and some connections. Once you do that, once you make the connections, it's like just a form or something like that to start your first collaboration. Of course, you have a different types of collaboration with different types of funding and different amounts of money. So the more money you ask, the more money you access, you need to put more information. But used to be like it's quite simple to do that. It's not something hard to do that.
Thank you, Evandro. I think we are close to our limits. There is another pool, a feedback pool now on the screen. If the attendants of the seminar could answer, we appreciate that. And I would like to thank you all the participants, the panelists, for the insightful presentations. It was a very interesting and very good discussion, and I hope we can foster even more the collaboration between Brazil and Canada. Thank you so much for all. Thank you so much for all the participants of the webinar.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
That's great. Thank you so much. Have a nice weekend, and we keep in touch and always available here for whatever further doubts. Please feel free. Thank you very much. Have a nice weekend, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.